Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Former Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper gave a ringing endorsement to the UCP and explained why he says Albertans should not vote for the NDP. We hear from a Lethbridge Liberal candidate who explains why it's so important to hold candidates to account this election. And wet weather and cooler temperatures are continuing to help the more than 2,000 firefighters who are still battling the wildfires in our province.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Elections Alberta says more than 550,000 Albertans have already voted in this week's advance vote, which is on pace to break records. According to Elections Alberta, close to 700,000 Albertans voted early back in 2019, and we could easily break that mark. Advance voting is open until Saturday night at 8 p.m. Election Day is coming up on Monday. Be sure to watch Bridge City News for the results. UCP candidate Rebecca Schultz has been campaigning in her Calgary Shaw riding. Schultz commented on the amount of Albertans who've already come out to vote so far.
The United Conservatives are doing strong. Our team is out every single day, knocking on doors and encouraging Albertans to get out and vote. And that's why I'm optimistic in the numbers that we're seeing. I think it's people that know that we absolutely, as a province, cannot afford to go back to the NDP. And that's certainly motivating people to get out and vote in this election.
It appears as though both UCP leader Daniel Smith and NDP leader Rachel Notley are keeping busy during the final days of the election campaign. Now, when it comes to commenting on her previous record as Premier from 2015 to 2019, Rachel Notley says they had to work with the hand they were dealt. She says should her party form government again, it will have a solid economic plan moving forward.
Most Alberta voters understand that the government of Alberta does not control the price of oil. And as a result of that, you have to work responsibly with the hand that you're dealt. And that's what we did during our time in office. And I believe very strongly that we have the plan going forward to create jobs, to diversify the economy, to run a responsible fiscal plan, and to put Alberta on a very, very stable economic footing going forward.
The UCP announced plans to create a community recreation centre infrastructure fund. Officials say the $80 million initiative over 4 years would help get mid-sized recreation facilities into communities that much sooner. Calgary UCP candidate Jason Lewan says families rely on community facilities for kids programs, fitness classes, and other recreational activities. Lewan says the money would ensure more people have access to those programs in their neighbourhoods. Former Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper has thrown his support behind UCP leader Daniel Smith. Harper says there's only one option to protect the economic livelihoods of Albertans, and that is Daniel Smith and the United Conservative Party.
After some tough years, our province has finally recovered from the last NDP term. But Rachel Notley is promising to undo all that progress. The NDP is promising to hike taxes on job creators by 38%, a massive hike that would kill tens of thousands of jobs. Rachel Notley tried a similar tax hike the last time she was Premier. Investment fled our province and mass layoffs ensued. It's no wonder Rachel Notley doesn't want to talk about her record as Premier. Nor does Rachel Notley want to talk about the fact that the Trudeau Liberals are voting NDP in this election. Rachel Notley and Justin Trudeau are a combination that puts Alberta's economy at great risk.
Well, it appears as though the UCP is not only leading in the latest polls, but also with the sign wars. Here's one that was spotted recently in Calgary. The NDP put up a sign saying, "This election is about trust and leadership." So someone from the UCP added a little sign of their own in the front saying, "So make sure you vote for Daniel Smith." Caitlyn Ford was a UCP candidate who ran in the Calgary Mountain View riding back in the 2019 provincial election. Ford had to step down a month or so into her campaign after being accused of being a racist. It turns out she was wrongfully accused, but the damage had already been done to her campaign and her life. She is now speaking out about cancel culture and explained in a nutshell what really happened.
The night before the writs drop, Press Progress published an article claiming that in a private conversation years earlier, that I had, in their words, echoed the rhetoric of white nationalists and complained that white supremacist terrorists are treated unfairly. As it turned out, I now know from litigation that they did, in fact, deceptively edit and redact the excerpts of this private conversation that they published. And they framed it in such a way, this is right after the, you may recall the Christchurch Mosque massacre, where 50 people were killed at prayer in New Zealand. And so right after this massacre, they were suggesting that I sympathized with terrorism effectively.
You know, there's even a documentary shot discussing what Ford experienced, and she'll share the details with BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our program. Pat Chizek is running in the Alberta provincial election. Now, she's not with either of the two main parties, but instead is running for the Alberta Liberal Party. Chizek explains why she's seeking to become the MLA for Lethbridge West. She says the bottom line for her is that voters need to hold their candidates to account.
I am running because I feel that the candidates are not listening, and I want them to start listening to the people that they're supposed to represent. And if nobody questions them and they just follow them blindly, they're not being put to task. They don't seem to be wanting to stand up and show, these are my values. This is what I'm going to do for you. And if I can just get people, even if they follow the UCP or the NDP adamantly, they've got to start questioning their representatives to make sure that they represent Lethbridge first and not their party leader.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Liberal Lethbridge West candidate Pat Chizek and BCN's Naveen Day coming up after Business News. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his government is providing $4 billion in funding and is planning to double the housing construction in Canada to address the housing crisis. Despite those efforts, however, he says housing challenges are being felt by everyone, everywhere.
We need to increase the supply of housing. It's that simple. Our government wants to see housing construction double over the coming years. Now, no single order of government can solve this alone, but we're putting real dollars behind this target. In March, to eliminate barriers to new housing supply, we launched the Housing Accelerator Fund. Through the program, we will directly fund municipalities' action plans, with the boldest plans resulting in the most housing units, especially affordable units, being rewarded. Without sufficient housing in our communities, our economies are held back.
It was a mainly cloudy day in Lethbridge today, and there's a slight chance of some rain developing for the weekend. Jeanette Rocher is now with a quick peek at the forecast. Jeanette, when could we potentially look forward to seeing more of that liquid sunshine?
Yeah, well, Saturday, actually, Hal, we will be seeing the weather do a little bit of everything from sunshine to some cloud coverage to a little bit of shower activity and then even a risk of some thunderstorms, but a high of 24. So we're well above our average for this time of year. Overnight this evening, we're looking at 8 degrees with clear skies, and then into tomorrow as we get into the shower activity, we should be seeing the sunshine again for the rest of the weekend. And I'll be back later on the show to give you all those details plus that national forecast.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. More than 5,000 Albertans remain out of their homes as around 55 wildfires continue to burn in the province, with 16 listed as being out of control. Government officials say 7 evacuation orders remain in place. Indigenous Services Canada says active wildfires are threatening 3 First Nations communities in Alberta, while 12 others have been identified as being on watch for the threat of a wildfire. An official with Alberta Wildfires says thanks to the rain and cooler weather in many areas of the province, firefighters are gaining the upper hand.
Firefighters have been able to cut more fire guard, reinforce containment lines, and put in the work on the ground to bring these wildfires under control. Albertans must continue to exercise caution. As we've said before, this is a record-breaking wildfire season, and we appreciate the actions Albertans have taken to reduce the number of human-caused wildfires. You'll be able to find more information on the fire bans and restrictions in place at albertafirebans.ca.
Following public outcry, the City of Calgary reversed a decision to cancel fireworks for Canada Day. City administration said originally that the fireworks were culturally insensitive, but they changed their minds after it was learned that 10 city councillors were preparing a motion to bring back the display. Now, when it first announced plans to pilot an enhanced pyrotechnic show instead of the fireworks, the city cited a number of factors for the decision. That included sensitivities around truth and reconciliation, the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Immigration Act, impact on wildlife, and late-night noise. City Councillor Sonia Sharp led the charge on a notice of motion that would have directed city officials to proceed with a fireworks display. She said Canada Day celebrations are for everyone and that the country needs to embrace its history. The case involving a couple accused in the assault of a 6-week-old baby girl was back in Lethbridge court today. BCN's Angela Stewart was at the courthouse with the latest.
Lawyers for both the father and mother, who are not co-accused and are being charged separately, took to the stand Friday morning in front of a packed courtroom. Defense counsel for the father, Darcy Shirt, spoke first, saying his client wants to resolve the case and that a response to an early case resolution, or ECR, would need to be made. The Crown requested to have an agreed statement of facts also be drawn up. Defense attorney John Oman appeared on behalf of the mother, requesting to have the matter be adjourned for possible guilty pleas. Oman stated a resolution has already been completed, and the Crown requested to have an agreed statement of facts along with a guilty plea. On January 18th, Lethbridge police rescued a 6-week-old baby girl from a North Side home after receiving a child abuse tip from the public. It's alleged the baby had been repeatedly abused and sexually abused. The infant was taken to Alberta Children's Hospital in Calgary in critical condition. Her 52-year-old father has been charged with aggravated assault, sexual interference, and failing to provide the necessaries of life. Her 31-year-old mother has been charged with failing to provide the necessaries of life. Neither is being named as there is a publication ban in effect to protect the victim's identity. Well, the matters have been adjourned to June 16th. The pair will remain in custody until that time. Hal?
Thanks so much, Angela. Service dogs in Lethbridge have been given a paw up to those who are dealing with trauma in our city. Lethbridge Police Victim Services Dog Court is celebrating her birthday today. The four-legged friend provides support for employees within Lethbridge Police Service who have had to deal with traumatic events along with people here in our community. Staff with the Victim and Witness Services Unit told us how many victims and employees Court has assisted.
We've seen about 700 hours of internal support and about 350 victims have used her since she got here last year in different capacities. So she's had the opportunity to work with a wide variety of different people, and just being here, that's sort of the motto of VSU, is be there. And so just having her available to be here when people need her has been amazing.
Court has received extensive training through the Dogs with Wings Assistance Dog Society here in Alberta. Toby and Bernadine Boulay are the parents of Logan Boulay, the humble Bronco who died following a tragic bus crash in Saskatchewan. The couple made a donation of $20,000 to help support rugby players for the Rick Suggett Women's Rugby Memorial Award. The former head coach of the women's team passed away in 2017 due to a brain hemorrhage. Suggett became an organ donor after his death, inspiring the Boulay son Logan to do the same. BCN's Micah Quinn has that story.
Logan had a conversation with his dad, with Toby, out on our deck one night. They would often have a hot tub and then sit on the deck afterwards. And Logan had a conversation. He said, when I'm 21, I'm going to sign up to be an organ donor, because if Rick can donate organs, so do I.
To say that Rick Suggett had a huge impact on Logan Boulay would be a massive understatement. Unfortunately, Logan passed away after the Humboldt Broncos bus was hit by a transport truck in 2018, killing 16 people and injuring 13 others. Bernadine Boulay told us Logan's decision to become an organ donor was spearheaded by Suggett.
So at that time, Logan was 20 and he turned 21 in March of 2018. And that's what he chose to do, to celebrate being 21, which is not what a lot of 21-year-olds would do.
The two families became very close once Suggett and Toby Boulay began working together with the U of L women's rugby team. He even ended up training Logan and 3 of his friends before he went to play in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League.
Rick would have the boys send quotes to him and how they were doing. So they talked about mental preparation and stuff. So that was how Logan and Rick really became connected.
The Boulays are hoping that having a story attached to the award will ensure that future recipients will be able to connect the dots as to why the family decided to donate the $20,000. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Under the rural renewal stream of the Alberta Advantage immigration program, eligible employers have the ability to seek out employees who are not permanent residents of our province. This is all being done through Economic Development Lethbridge, which applied for a community designation to make it all happen. An official with EDL says this comes as job vacancies have been on the rise.
I think we had north of 6,000 here in the Lethbridge Medicine Hat area as of relatively recently, and we've seen big ramp ups across many different sectors. So we're hearing the message loud and clear that employers around here require assistance. We don't suspect that this will be a magic bullet or any sort of panacea, but we do think that it's just another piece of the puzzle that could help employers in need.
The program officially launched earlier today. The Calgary Zoo announced the birth of a new baby gorilla. Officials say Yuande, a 15-year-old Western lowland gorilla, gave birth Wednesday afternoon. Jasiri, a 24-year-old silverback male, is the father of the baby, whose gender has not yet been confirmed. The Western lowland gorilla is critically endangered species. So cute. Well, it was another mixed bag in southwestern Alberta today. Some sunshine mixed with clouds and even light showers in certain areas, but not a bad weekend is shaping up so far. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. Well, it wasn't a bad day weather-wise across much of southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Roche is now with a full look at the forecast. Jeanette, not a bad weekend is shaping up here in Lethbridge with only a slight chance of showers on Saturday?
Yeah, you're right, Hal. We are expecting only a slight chance on Saturday, and we're looking at that 30% chance coupled with a risk of a thunderstorm. High of 24 degrees, so as we get into Sunday and Monday, look at those temperatures. 25 degrees with clear skies, mainly sunny as well on Tuesday, high of 26. Going to jump up to 28 degrees on Wednesday and 26 degrees on Thursday with mainly cloudy skies to round out that 7-day forecast. So the average high for this time of year, 20 degrees. We've been well above that. Average low, 6 degrees, 33. That was our high temperature on this day. That happened back in 1966. And 2 years earlier, look what happened. It was the record low, -1 on this day back then. 5:34, that's when the sun rose this morning. Sunset this evening expected at 9:24 p.m. We're looking at 15 hours and 50 minutes of daylight. Mainly clear skies with a bit of cloud coverage by the afternoon there on the west coast. Victoria's high 21 degrees as you're closer to the water, 17. Very windy in the Juan de Fuca Strait, though, 30 to 60 winds there. 20 for a high in Vancouver. That's near the water. As you move inland, it's 23 and a high humidex in Vancouver as well. Clear skies expected in Edmonton with a high of 24 degrees, 23 for a high expected in Calgary. Looking at 30% chance of showers. In Regina, you can double that to 60% chance of showers with a high of 19 degrees. Regina seeing scattered showers, also a risk of a thunderstorm, high of 20 degrees. Winnipeg actually was the hot spot in Canada earlier today, sitting at 32 degrees, and they're looking at record highs right now. So they're in that high heat index. A heat advisory is in effect for the rest of the weekend. We're going to be seeing highs of 30 to 32 degrees and overnight lows of only 19 degrees. So it's going to stay fairly warm in the evening. So it's going to be a hot one in Winnipeg this evening, or this whole weekend, really. So stay hydrated, put on your sunscreen as we move into the central part of the country. Toronto looking at 20 degrees, 22 for a high in Ottawa and Montreal with clear skies all around there. As we move further east into the Maritimes, Fredericton's high, 23 degrees, mainly clear skies. Same thing for Halifax, lots of sunshine, 21 degrees there, 24 high in Charlottetown. St. John's, Newfoundland, plenty of sunshine, high of 8 degrees. Fog and some inshore winds there, and those winds up to 40 kilometers per hour. So there you have it. That's your forecast.
An Alberta business group says increased divisiveness and political extremism poses a real threat to our province's economic future. Adam Legg with the Business Council of Alberta says his group is concerned about political polarization during the current provincial election campaign. He says Monday's vote comes at a time when Alberta's economy is doing better than it has for many years, but is also facing challenges such as an ongoing labor shortage. He adds political divisiveness can square off and scare off capital investment and deter labor attraction and retention. Lululemon is promising to hire 2,600 people over the next 5 years. Officials with the Vancouver-based company say they've secured an additional 125,000 square feet of office space in the city's downtown core. They say they're pretty confident after the federal government said they would be able to hire more foreign workers without needing to apply for a labor market impact assessment. Federal Innovation Minister François-Philippe Champagne says if Ottawa had not acted, the company's headquarters would have left Vancouver. Beginning next spring, all current and future Ford electric vehicles will have access to around 12,000 Tesla supercharger stations in both Canada and the United States. Ford CEO Jim Farley and Tesla CEO Elon Musk announced the agreement earlier this week during a Twitter Spaces audio chat. Farley says the agreement is a huge move for the auto industry and all electric vehicle consumers. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 146 points on the day to finish at 19,920. The Dow was up 328 points to 33,093. The S&P 500 was up 54 on the day to 4205. And the Nasdaq was up 277 points to 12,975. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.05 to $72.88 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 13 cents to $2.18 US. Gold was up $5.05 to $19.4646 US an ounce, and silver was up 56 cents to $23.30 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.08 per bushel, barley's at $8.82, canola's at $15.50, and corn is at $10.08 per bushel. Live cattle June contract was up 5 cents to $167.30. Feeder cattle August contract was down 78 cents to $233.93, and lean hogs June contract was down $1.58 to $76.08. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to $73.45 US. Recapping one of our top stories, there's been some good news regarding the wildfires here in our province. Fire officials say there are around 55 wildfires left, with 16 still being out of control. Alberta Wildfire says thanks to the rain and cooler temperatures in both central and northern Alberta, the 2,500 firefighters who are battling the blazes are making some serious progress. There was a UCP candidate from the 2019 Alberta provincial election who had to drop out because of a nasty smear campaign when she was falsely accused of being a racist. That former Calgary UCP candidate, Caitlyn Ford, will share her story with us momentarily. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
Social media and political life can be a minefield with retaliations, lies, and conjecture. We've been seeing this in this run up to this May 2023 election, but the tactic to silence opposition is not new and seems to have intensified over the last number of years. Our guest today had controversy thrust upon her when she was running in the 2019 Alberta provincial election. Caylan Ford had been a star candidate for the UCP in a Calgary riding until she was labeled a racist and was declared guilty in the court of public opinion, and in very short order was canceled. She claims nothing could be further from the truth and that it was all a setup. Now, a documentary sharing her side of the story has recently been released called When the Mob Came. Take a look at this.
Controversy surrounding a United Conservative Party candidate has caused her to step down.
Yes, Caylan Ford has resigned as a UCP candidate in the riding of Calgary Mountain View after a report claiming she echoed white nationalist rhetoric.
What was shared was her private messages. She was engaged in a Facebook chat with somebody.
The accusation was that she had said something in a private conversation that had echoed the words of white supremacists.
Caylan Ford says those Facebook messages were taken out of context.
The statement did not have one word of contrition, apology, or backing down from those statements.
The NDP has now started running attack ads framing the United Conservative Party as intolerant.
I was utterly shocked to hear of the comments that that candidate, who was of course a star candidate for the UCP, made.
Racism and homophobia and things like that. If you can paint your opponent as one of those things, they just become toxic and they can't be touched. But all's fair in love and war, right?
The UCP as a party has a problem with racism.
I had text messages appear on my phone saying Caylan's a racist. I'm like, what? That's not true. And then I saw the Press Progress story.
Caylan Ford is under fire after an article from Press Progress. The outlet is linked to the NDP-affiliated think tank Broadbent Institute.
So I remember asking myself some questions saying, did I get that wrong? Could I have misjudged it? This is nothing at all like what I would have expected of Caitlyn Ford.
This is either the strangest white supremacist I can imagine, or there's just something more going on here.
Her own private messages that are expressing a nuanced view on a contentious social issue are what are used to end her political career. Are you kidding me? Nobody is safe.
Caylan Ford joins me now. Caylan, welcome to Bridge City News. Great to have you on today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay, so Caylan, as painful as it might still be, can you take us back to that time when the accusations arose? What happened exactly? What was the conversation that kind of started this firestorm?
Sure. So I was running in the 2019 provincial election as a United Conservative Party candidate in a real swing riding. So it was a constituency that Conservatives hadn't won in 20 years, and I was running against the then Justice Minister for the NDP, as well as the leader of the Liberal Party. And yet polls showed, as we got closer to the election, that it was very much a toss-up. Our internal polling showed I was on track to win. I assume the other parties had the same polling. And under those circumstances, the NDP had there's an organization called the Broadbent Institute, which runs a quasi-media outlet called Press Progress. And this is effectively the opposition research mill of the NDP. During the election, it was very aggressively putting out negative stories about Conservative candidates. And in that way, these stories would be able to sort of move into the mainstream. And so a month before the election, less than a month actually, the night before the writs drop, Press Progress published an article claiming that in a private conversation years earlier, that I had, in their words, echoed the rhetoric of white nationalists and complained that white supremacist terrorists are treated unfairly. Now, the record of this private conversation was never publicly disclosed. I did not have it, so I couldn't effectively refute these accusations at the time. As it turned out, I now know from litigation that they did, in fact, deceptively edit and redact the excerpts of this private conversation that they published. And they framed it in such a way, this is right after the, you may recall the Christchurch Mosque massacre, where 50 people were killed at prayer in New Zealand. And so right after this massacre, they were suggesting that I sympathized with terrorism effectively. And that wasn't true. I had a background in studying counterterrorism and international security studies. I was actually talking about how to more effectively deal with radicalization. But that was sort of torqued in this article. Within 4 hours, my party had asked me to resign. It was national news by the next morning. And it remained national news through the duration of the election. And by the end of that, I was basically left completely socially isolated. People were afraid of being seen with me in public. No one would hire me. No one would even talk to me. And so it was a profoundly isolating experience, after which I was basically left with no way of earning a living for several years.
Mm-hmm. So this was a private conversation, I'm assuming in like a direct message, maybe on Facebook or something. Okay, so obviously you know the person that you were talking to. So do you feel that there were people close to you or that were involved in this attack on you? How would they have gotten a hold of that conversation?
Well, so that's this is very much part of the story that's told in the documentary. And it's a story that's so convoluted that it takes a feature-length documentary to tell it. But the other party was a fellow who I had met years earlier in political circles, who was interested in running for office, and I think had felt sort of spurned that he was not really having the success that he thought his talents merited in politics. And as a consequence of that, he went out on a very elaborate campaign over the course of an entire year to try to end my candidacy, and did that with numerous false accusations. He had accused me of fraud, tried to plant stories in the media about me committing fraud, had filed a false police report claiming I assaulted him. And none of that gained traction. The thing that gained traction, because it sort of reflects the nature of, what are the current really controversial debates socially, was the accusation that I sympathized with white supremacists somehow. So that's what ended up terminating my candidacy.
Wow. Okay. So, well, maybe to an outside observer, it could seem like these accusations came swiftly and suddenly. So, from your point of view now, do you see this as a coordinated attack, or do you think it was just him on his own?
I very much believe that there was a great element of collusion here that's been borne out in the court record. So I actually had to get a restraining order against this person. That restraining order was only very recently upheld by a trial judge, and that decision actually led to the recognition of a new tort of civil harassment in Alberta. So this is kind of the thing that you don't see when you see the headlines, is that there are layers and layers behind the story. And in this case, I think the truth was much stranger than the fiction that was concocted. But yes, I have alleged in a defamation claim against the NDP and Press Progress that this was very much a result of deliberate planning and collusion, that they were planning this for several months, that they decided to release this story right before the writs dropped, because that's when it would do the most harm to my candidacy. And a trial judge seemed to agree with that assessment as well, that was deliberately planned to maximize the harm that it would cause me. So it was not in a matter of legitimate public interest. It was about a sort of calculated attempt to destroy a person's reputation for political gain.
Okay, so you did receive a victory in court there. So, and since then, you've created a documentary about this incident, as I mentioned in the intro. So why did you choose to do this?
Well, I found myself in the aftermath of this in a very difficult position. As I said, employers wouldn't engage with me because I was seen as a reputational liability, right? If I have an unusual name, if you Google me, everything that you would find was headlines accusing me of basically being a white supremacist. So that's not something that employers want to be associated with, that charities or that any sort of philanthropic cause wants to be associated with. So on the one hand, I couldn't earn a living. I also couldn't find a news outlet that was willing to give me a platform to tell the real story of what had happened here. A few journalists tried. They found themselves on the receiving end of threats, I believe an extortion attempt. Danielle Smith, who was then a radio host, she had me on air. She was the only person who interviewed me in a public forum. And after that, she was subject to a boycott campaign orchestrated by sort of NDP affiliated actors to try to force her to apologize, to drive her off the air. The mayor of Calgary was apparently was supporting the premise of this, telling people they should boycott her show, just for giving me an opportunity to defend myself against false accusations. So after that, no one would give me a platform to tell the story. And that interview was pulled offline by her employer at the time. So what I didn't have a background or a way of earning a living. I had a background in documentary filmmaking, though. I'd just recently won a Screenwriters Award for a feature documentary, and I'd recently made another one as well. So I had done documentaries on mostly focusing on totalitarianism in China, censorship, mass persuasion under totalitarian regimes, propaganda, and scapegoating mechanisms and how that works. And so I think this equipped me fairly well to be able to tell kind of a cancel culture story that touches on some of the same themes, albeit in a different form here in Canada.
Interesting. Okay, so maybe share with us that process of creating that documentary and what it did for you personally.
Well, so we began production. I was very fortunate that the team that had actually been doing video with me and with the United Conservative Party during the campaign, they had all this footage of me. So I reached out to them and said, would you be willing to go on this sort of crazy adventure? And I'm very grateful that they agreed. So we have had this great store of sort of contemporaneous material, and we're able to tell the story. Now, I should say it's kind of horrifying making an autobiographical documentary. To me, it feels like the height of narcissism. It's a lot of emotional you see in the film, there are some very raw, very emotional moments. That's uncomfortable for someone like me. I'm quite introverted. So on the one hand, there's an element of horror at that. But
you're introverted and you were running for public office.
It was a weird combination. I like people, though, despite being introverted. I like, the one-on-one conversations and getting to know people is actually very interesting. But, when I was campaigning, oh gosh, I hated seeing my face on flyers or my name on signs. It was sort of at a deep level. I was so embarrassed by self-promotion. So this film is challenging, but I will say that there is something cathartic about being able to share an experience of suffering and have other people see it and understand it, and possibly to connect on some level. And that's what I've been hearing from people so far, is that this film, and at one level, is about cancel culture. It's about Alberta politics. There's a lot of very familiar faces in this documentary if you follow Alberta politics. But ultimately, what it's about is, I think, perennial questions of sort of ultimate concern about how we should live. And the sort of central argument I'm trying to make is that actually suffering is not necessarily bad for a person, that there is some redemptive value and purpose in it, that it can afford us greater perspective and an ability to connect with other people in their suffering as well.
Yeah.
And that actually what we should most fear is we should be afraid of doing injustice to others rather than suffering it ourselves.
Mm.
So that's kind of my thesis with the film, and I hope that resonates with people, irrespective of sort of where they fall on the political spectrum or whether they follow Alberta politics or not.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what you've been hearing from viewers so far of your documentary. I know we are kind of living in that age of cancel culture right now, so I would imagine it has happened to a number of people. Has anyone reached out to you yet? I know it was just released recently, wasn't it?
Yeah. I've had a lot of people reach out and say that it spoke to them because many people have gone through something kind of analogous, probably not to the extreme degree that I did, but I think for a lot of people, they've said that this brought them back to what they experienced and actually helped them make sense of what they went through. And again, human beings, we're social beings. We need other people to sort of see us, to understand our experiences. I think we're driven to share our deepest experiences with other people. And so at one level, I think that's what this sort of does for people. And for others, I've been very heartened that a number of people watched it and reached out to apologize as well, which is
really
not something that I was looking for, but I will admit that it's a very kind gesture, and even if it's sort of 4 years after the fact, it's very welcome.
Yeah, and I mean, it was an opportunity for you to, I guess, really tell your side of the story. Do you have anything pending legally in court still over this?
So yeah, there were 2 court actions that arose out of this. One was an application for a restraining order, and that, as I said, I was granted one. It was violated. And so I recently had to go to trial. The restraining order was upheld, and this individual who was behind these allegations was cited in contempt of court as well for violating that order. Parallel to that, I have a $7 million defamation suit pending against the CBC, the Toronto Star, the NDP, Broadbent Institute, Progress Alberta, and a number of other actors who were involved in this defamation. So we're hoping to conclude discovery by the end of this year. It's a very drawn out process.
Okay. What does this experience say to you about the media in Alberta and Canada? Have you given up on it totally?
Well, have I given up on? Oh, I certainly. One of the things about seeing how a topic that you know very well is depicted in the media is that it invariably erodes your trust in the media. And that's never more the case than when the media is reporting about you. I had to watch, basically unable to respond, I had to watch national news outlets speculate for months about the kind of person I was, about what my motives were, about what I thought, without an opportunity to speak for myself.
And nobody reached out to you to ask you what?
Well, that's a long story, but
sure it is.
Yeah, essentially, I don't believe that there were any sincere efforts made on the part of the media, who were provided with lots of material from me, many, many statements and offers to speak. And those were not pursued. But it has also freed me of ever believing any negative story I see about anyone else. So, my default now, if I see a story about someone who's accused of something in the media, is to recognize I don't have enough information to form a judgment about that person. This reporter probably doesn't have enough information. And I have a certain amount of sympathy for reporters because newsrooms have largely been hollowed out. They're working on tight deadlines. It's easier not to ask questions. It's easier to just sort of accept a narrative as it's presented for you and turn around some copy and get it on the wire as soon as you can so that you don't lose the opportunity to capitalize on the story. But that's a limited sympathy, I suppose. But yes, I would say to treat negative stories with extreme skepticism and to remember that it is a virtue to be able to view others charitably and to withhold judgment when we don't have enough information about a situation.
Caitlin, thanks so much for your time today. Where can people view this documentary?
So if you go to whenthemobcame.com, you'll be directed to a website and be able to follow the links to find it on, to be able to purchase it through Vimeo.
Caitlin, thank you so much. We're out of time, but thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
That was Caylan Ford, former UCP candidate and a documentary filmmaker who joined us from Calgary.
The Alberta provincial election is only days away, with advanced polls already underway. Our guest today is Pat Chizek. She's the Alberta Liberal Party candidate for Lethbridge West. Pat, welcome to Bridge City News. Great to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, a lot of our viewers are curious who Pat Chizek is. Can you just tell us a little bit about your background? Where are you from originally, and who are your political influences?
Basically, I was born and raised in Saskatchewan, and I moved here to attend university, and I've been living here ever since. And I have worked as a substitute teacher in Edmonton, and I worked way up north for many years, and then I moved down to the Lethbridge area, and I've been here ever since.
And you've been very adamant about publicly declaring that the Alberta Liberals are not the same party as the federal Liberal Party led by Justin Trudeau. So how would you explain to the viewers what the difference between the two parties is?
Basically, the number one difference is we may have similar values, but we do not cater to them. We are our own separate independent party. We use the Liberal name. We have Liberal values. But like I know the NDP you joined the NDP provincially and you're there nationally also.
Right, yes.
And it's different for the Liberal Party. It's like the UCP is not necessarily belonging to the Conservative Party of Canada. We're similar.
So, but wouldn't the Alberta Liberals in a way have the ear of the federal Liberals or not at all?
Of course we would, because one of the very first things that our leader put out was we have to listen first. And a lot of politicians, they speak first and they start to tell people what to do. So we have to listen. So anytime you're talking with whether it's a municipal government or another provincial government or the federal government, you have to go in agreeing that you want to listen rather than go in and start telling them what to do.
Now, we've had the opportunity to see you in action at the candidate forums in Lethbridge, and you've admitted that the odds are stacked against a victory for the Alberta Liberals. So tell us about yourself and why you're running in this election.
I am running because I feel that the candidates are not listening, and I want them to start listening to the people that they're supposed to represent. And if nobody questions them and they just follow them blindly, they're not being put to task. They don't seem to be wanting to stand up and show these are my values. This is what I'm going to do for you. And if I can just get people, even if they follow the UCP or the NDP adamantly, they've got to start questioning their representatives to make sure that they represent Lethbridge first and not their party leader. And that's why I'm running, just to bring questions in. I don't know if that's the best way to explain it, but that's how I feel.
And also there's been a lot of negativity between the two main parties, a lot of mudslinging, political attack ads. I'm sure a lot of people are getting very tired of them. What sort of feedback have you been receiving following the forums that you've been attending or when you've been out door knocking, which I'm assuming you're doing?
Basically, I am not door knocking. I don't like door knockers.
Oh.
I find that they come between 6 and 8. That's family time. People are getting home from work. They want to have a meal. They want to have time with their kids. And when I've done it in the past, it hasn't been well received. And it doesn't matter before you get out what party you're for. So I just said, I'm not going to door knock. I will speak with people when I'm out in public. I will do things like this. I will answer phone calls, emails, but I don't do that because there's so much negativity. And there's a lot of voter apathy, like they're fed up with the governments of not listening. And I want to be a person who can listen first.
And it's interesting that you're being very observant of the 6 to 8 time, which is family time. So let's get into some of the issues. You're a retired school teacher, so I'm sure you have a lot to say about education. Tell me, what do you see as being some of the biggest issues in the education system, and where would you like to see change take place?
Actually, in this campaign, I have been educated as to the shortcomings our current education system has. And I've spoken with a lot of teachers, and none of the teachers have ever said they want more for themselves. Not one has said that. They want to bring back funding that was taken away for kids who have learning specialties. And whether it's in speech or language or hearing or all those things, kids that have behavior specialties, a lot of those are missing. We are the lowest province per student funding. We promised, like, we got to put in billions to get us up to the average. So we need to bring that kind of special things in. We need to have educational assistants who are well paid. They're not well paid. I just found out this week how the number of them that have in Lethbridge here that have to have second jobs because they're only earning $24,000 to $25,000 a year. Very low paid. And why? This should be a calling for them. This should be where, like a teacher, they want to go in this as a career and not just a part-time job.
Now, we've been hearing a lot about overcrowding in the classroom as well. What can you tell us about this? And as an MLA, what would you do to help that situation?
Well, I've heard numbers from anywhere from 26 to 34 kids in the elementary school. We have to first mandate specific numbers. And when they get over those numbers, you have to have a second classroom or a third classroom. And if you compound that with a class that has 28 or 30 students in there, and 3 or 4 of them have special needs, and they don't have an educational assistant, learning for everyone drops. So we would mandate K to 3 to start with, enrollment numbers.
Now, as a teacher, can you just tell us, what is your opinion of the school voucher system where parents are given a voucher for each student or for each of their children, and they can enroll their child in a school of their choice, but then that would also put schools in competition with each other?
First and foremost, I am a public school teacher and I like the public school system. And I like it because the public school system doesn't select its students. We welcome everybody into the fold. We try to maximize each student can reach their potential. And some specialty schools, some will only select certain students, and others get left out. I do also believe it is the parents' right to choose. There should be a baseline that each student is worth so much money to the school system, whether they go to a charter school, whether they go to a private school. But I don't think voucher system would work if you're going to have a system that includes public education.
Now, moving along here, healthcare is top of mind in this election. How can we attract and retain doctors and other medical staff for Albertans?
First off, we have to open up more spaces for doctors to study. We have to open up more spaces in Alberta schools. We have to start admitting more Alberta students. We can help, and this is one of our ideas, is to offset the cost of tuition upon graduation. So if they stay here, we will help offset the tuition costs. The second thing is if we need family doctors, then maybe we should consider paying them more. Because a lot of doctors right now, they go in and they specialize because they're in such debt to begin with. They will specialize to help them get out of debt sooner. So maybe we should consider paying our family doctors more.
And what do you suggest for shortening wait times for surgeries and other diagnostic testing?
It's the same thing as we have a medical shortage of doctors, nurses, LPNs, aides. We have to start to educate them. There's a lot of parties that go and say, well, we're going to recruit from other provinces, and other provinces are in the same place we are. And if we're going to start like on RN, it's going to take 4 years. So no government who's ever elected cannot snap their fingers and immediately the shortage is over. We've got to educate more of them and then help them stay here by enticing them with maybe some remission in their student loans.
And one thing that is loosely tied to healthcare as well, people are tired of drug addiction and the increasing crime and violence that comes along with it. And of course, we've seen more than our fair share of that here in Lethbridge. How would the Alberta Liberals address these issues?
Our focus is not on just addressing addiction or just addressing homelessness or just addressing mental health. You have to tie in all of these together. And I was at a forum the other day, and I was listening to a man from the Blackfoot Nation, and he really seemed to me to have a total approach to this. And I think that's what we have in our own platform was the same thing. It's a total approach. Don't just deal with addictions. Don't just deal with mental health. And housing, you can't just give them houses and think it's all going to be safe again. We learned that with our supervised consumption site. And it was like a one-legged chair. It wasn't going to hold up. So we believe in an approach that has the whole person approach.
So you mentioned the supervised consumption site. Would you be for or against setting up one in Lethbridge? The UCP's Nathan Newdorf and Cheryl Sewborn have said no. The NDP's Shannon Phillips has also said no. And NDP Lethbridge East candidate Rob Miyashiro, after being asked the question a couple times, said, quote, at this point, no. So where do you stand on this issue?
No. It's to bring it back the way it was. No, it did not work then. And I don't think if you did the same thing again, that's making the same mistake twice. No. So
you're talking about like the SCS being like a one-legged chair. Is this referring to the four-pillar approach to dealing with addiction?
Similar it is. Now you realize that I am not an addiction specialist. So once again, our policies listen to the people who are working with within this field, and to have a multifaceted approach. So you have to deal with the physical addiction. You have to deal with them not having a house. Maybe there's some mental health issues. Maybe there's some family issues. All those things must be dealt with before that person can be successful. And then this person has to be able to be successful once they've completed their programs. So do they have a job? So we have to be able to give all this. And without that approach, this is just if you're just only doing one, it's just putting a Band-Aid on an artery that's spurting blood.
And what's your opinion of the UCP proposal of forced treatment? Is that something you would back? Why or why not?
I don't think you can force treatment. I think that a person who wants help, no matter what their issue is, has to want help. You may give temporary success, and there's always going to be success stories. But I think that to work with the holistic aspect of it is more important than just we're going to get you clean and sober.
Now, switching gears, with ongoing inflation and affordability concerns, what kinds of solutions would a Liberal Party offer?
I'm just kind of wondering about inflation that we're seeing here. And I just heard on the news today that gas prices are going up again, and they're like a 194, 195 in Vancouver. And I'm kind of wondering is why they need to be that high. Because if you put gas prices up, that means transportation costs go up. That means food prices go up. That means our purchasing power goes down. This is basic inflation. And to me, when some of these big corporations that dominate our lives are raising money, I want to know why. especially when they are recording record profits each quarter. And I think we need a government that steps in and says, wait a minute, why are your prices so high? Why are utilities so high? When you're making record profits and people are barely getting by.
We're just about out of time, but any final thoughts on this election and any thoughts on how to see an increase in popularity for the Alberta Liberals?
Cool.